Welcome back. You're still watching the Nile article, and as we did see through the past report, the negative implications, the economic implications of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, not just on both countries and both sets of people, but on the global economy, on the international shipping routes, and more specifically for the Black Sea corridor, as we mentioned in the first part of the episode for tonight with Dr. Nabil Nagmeddin, the member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs and the Foreign Relations analyst, the importance of such a conflict and how it has affected politically and economically the course of things in the Middle East and for the rest of the world, and to be shedding more light on the economic aspect of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and how the future negotiations will be happening in the future. I'm honored to be having with me for today on the Nile article Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, the economic expert. Dr. Ayman, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Nile TV International and the Nile article.
You're most welcome, sir.
Of course, we did see what is happening for the Black Sea, which is considered one of the main corridors for the transit of the maritime navigation and more specifically for the grain trade. How do you think this has affected negatively the whole supply chain all over the world?
Well, actually, the Black Sea was traditionally one of the breadbasket corridors of the world. We know that Russia and Ukraine together, they control more than 1/4 of the international trade of wheat. They control more than half of the international trade of sunflower seeds that are used for the extraction of edible oil. Russia and Ukraine together, they literally move the prices of the international food market. Presently, we're seeing the Black Sea turning into an economic battlefield between Russia and Ukraine. Each country is trying to hit the exportation infrastructure of the other country in terms of exporting grains, seeds, and also Ukraine is trying to hit the Russian infrastructure of energy exportation. Already we are having an international crisis of energy due to the present geopolitical conflict in the Middle East. Brent oil price, which is the benchmark that's used for pricing oil worldwide, increased from around 73.
Yes, Dr. Ayman, in your opinion, what has made... Yes. Yes, in your opinion, what has made the Black Sea one of the major global export hubs, such as the Strait of Hormuz, as we did see the skirmishes between the US and the Iran forces regarding it, and the transit of ships through it, as Bab and Mandeb as well, and the Suez Canal?
Well, the major trade corridor for grains, as we said, because Russia and Ukraine, both of them, they control more than 1/4 of the international trade of wheat, as we said, and they control like more than half of the sunflower seed trade worldwide. Presently, we've seen the conflict between Russia and Ukraine turning the Black Sea into an economic battlefield. Each one of them is trying to hit the infrastructure of the other country, and such showdown actually in the Black Sea has affected the international prices of grain for pricing the international prices of wheat, increased by 17% from July 2026, from around $270 US dollars per ton. On the other hand, Ukraine is also trying to hit the oil exportation. Russia is one of the major oil exporters in the world. Actually, during some years, it was even the second oil exporter or the second oil producer after the United States, and even higher than Saudi Arabia. Presently, we are having an international crisis of energy due to the Russia-Ukraine war, where the Brent oil price, for example, increased from around $73 per barrel on February 28th, just before the eruption of the war between the US and Iran, into a present level of around $90 per barrel, therefore hitting the Russian infrastructure of oil excavation and oil exportation, would also contribute to the international crisis of energy.
Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, the economic expert, in your opinion, what has the crisis or the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the other conflict in the Middle East between the United States, Israel and Iran revealed about the global markets in terms of the food markets, the global food markets, and the energy markets as well, because they are depending heavily on certain routes, on certain outlets? What would happen if we don't have alternatives for these routes?
Actually, the present crises in the world, where we're talking about the Russia-Ukraine crisis or the present geopolitical, they reveal some important issues. First of all, the weaponization of international trade, the weaponization of international waterways, especially at the so-called choke points of the maritime trade corridors. I believe that in the coming decade, many of the countries of the world will come together to try to define certain charters for securing the international trade corridors, especially at the places where you have trades, where you have, and especially where these trades have different countries on their shores. That's on one hand. On the other hand, of course, whether we're talking about food security or energy security, countries have learned through the hard way that they have to diversify their sources of energy security and their sources of food security. There are a lot of different alternatives, and all these alternatives have to be present. Of course, there are many technical impediments or technical constraints on countries to increase their strategic reserves, like, for example, the perishability of the food items, the perishability of grains, the possibility of erection of stores for the grains, and the requirement for cooling off such stores, and the requirement for keeping grains at a good shape. So such technical constraints would constrain the capability of the countries to increase their strategic reserves. So the alternative would be to diversify their sources of supplies and to depend more on the places near them, especially for the net importers of food items like the Middle Eastern countries, and especially in Egypt. And I believe this is one of the main incentives, or one of the main forces or factors that enticed Egypt under the leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to establish the new Delta project on 2.2 million acres in the Western Delta.
Yes, Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, you have mentioned the activities of Egypt, especially under pressure from the current developments in the region and the developments in the world. How do you see the response of Egypt to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict that has been going on for years, for the past 4.5 years, and then to the conflict in the Middle East between the US, Iran and Israel on the economic front? How did you see the measures taken by the Egyptian government against those developments?
Well, actually, we can divide the measures into economic and political measures. If we start by the political measures, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been voicing the sound of reason, actually, in international politics by stating and repeating the fact that war would benefit nobody, that everybody would, all the parties would lose from the war, even the parties that did not participate in the war. That's on one hand. On the other hand, of course, Egypt is trying to mediate as much as it can to reach peace settlements, to reach permanent peace settlements and just peace settlements for the international conflict. This is one of the pillars of the Egyptian foreign policy. On the other hand, talking about the economic measures,
yes.
As I said, we're talking about the energy security. Egypt is trying to diversify its sources for energy. In the short run, it's trying now to increase the excavation effort. It's trying to partner with different international partners in order to increase the sources, the local sources for oil and natural gas. On the medium term and long term, Egypt is trying to increase its dependence on the renewable and sustainable energy. Our strategy is that by the year 2030, more than 45% of the electricity produced in Egypt has to be from renewable sources. Of course, other countries in the world, like in the European Union, for example, like Germany,
yes.
The strategy is 80% renewable energy. Spain, Portugal, Denmark, for example, and the Netherlands, I think they're trying to reach full electricity from renewable energy. So that's on the long run.
Yes, Dr. Ayman, Ghoneim, you've mentioned that the Egyptian government under the directives of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is trying to diversify its economic resources, especially after what had happened for the past 5 or 6 years in terms of international conflicts regarding the COVID-19 pandemic and then the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which is still going on until now, affecting negatively everyone, including Russia and Ukraine, and then moving on to the aggression by the Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, and finally with the ongoing war between the United States, Israel and Iran. All those developments and wars and conflicts and updates in the region and globally, they have affected us negatively, and more specifically, they have affected the revenues of the Suez Canal, for example. How do you think the Suez Canal could be bouncing back this year, especially after the developments that we have seen regarding the Strait of Hormuz for the past few months? Do you think that this is the year for the fiscal year, this is the year to be witnessing the bounce back for the revenues of the Suez Canal once again after what had happened in the past year for the Red Sea?
Well, actually, yes, the Suez Canal is now recovering. The revenues of Suez Canal reached 4.64 billion
yes.
in the fiscal year that ended on June 30th, 2026, which is which we called 25-26. So it reached 4.64 billion US dollars with an annual increase of 23%. So this, of course, denotes a recovery in the revenues of Suez Canal, and the perception of many of the international shipping companies that the risks, maritime risks and security risks in the Red Sea is declining. But of course, we don't want to over-exaggerate such recovery, because the revenues of Suez Canal is still around maybe half of the historic level of 9.5 billion that was reached in the year 22-23, and more than 10 billion that was reached in the calendar year 23. That's on one hand. On the other hand, regarding Suez Canal, Egypt is now and has been since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was elected to presidency in 2014. Egypt has been trying to move or transform the business model of Suez Canal from just being one of the sources of revenues or yield for the country into becoming a platform, an international platform actually for production, exportation, and logistics services. In this, the Suez Canal Economic Zone is actually one of the pillars of the transformation efforts undertaken by the new republic to transform the Egyptian economy from being previously an tier economy into becoming a production-based, export-based, and service-based economy. If we look at the revenues of Suez Canal, for example, in the previous year, 25-26, the revenues of the Suez Canal Economic Zone reached 15.9 billion Egyptian pounds by an annual increase of 37%, which is a very high level. And most of these revenues were taken or levied by or from the manufacturing activities, from allocating land to manufacturing industries and logistic projects. If we look at the stock of foreign investment presently in Suez Canal Economic Zone, it reached around 25 billion US dollars, including more than half of them come from China, for example. And this is also a very good sign, because China is trying to move a big part of its production capacity outside the borders of China in order to escape the American possible tariffs.
Dr. Ayman Ghoneim, the economic expert, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Nile TV International and the Nile Oracle. And this brings us to the end of the episode for tonight. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.